Hello, welcome to Walk in the Park. My name is Tony Ingraham, and today is July 30th, 2014, episode 82. If you want to see all of our episodes of Walk in the Park, go to walkinpark.com, my vid blog, and you'll find them all there. This one will be put up soon. Okay, so today we're going to look at big cliffs, and I got a lot of ground to cover, literally. And so we'll start off with looking at cliffs right around Ithaca, New York. There we go. This is an aerial photograph by Bill Hecht of Teganic Gorge. And this is the north side of the gorge where the stream bends around and is undermined the cliff. And those cliffs are pretty high. They're made out of shale and sandstone and maybe a little bit of limestone. Here's some overhanging stuff. It's in the gorge that drops off along pre-existing cracks called joints. Here's up near the falls. Amazing cliffs. So we have some pretty big cliffs around here. And here we go up around the falls here. These cliffs up around Teganic Falls are almost 400 feet high. So we've got some pretty big cliffs up here. This is up above the falls looking back east along the rim trail and looking back towards Cayuga Lake, which I don't think is actually quite visible in there. But certainly we have some substantial cliffs around here, as we do right around Teganic Falls, that are almost twice as tall as the 215-foot high waterfall itself. But we're going to move on to other cliffs around the area, including ones that most people don't get to see so much because they're along the lake. You get to see them at a distance, but if you go on a boat, like if you go on the MV Handle tour boat, the Ithaca boat tours, or one of the other boat tours, you can see these cliffs along the east shore of Cayuga Lake. In fact, many places along Cayuga Lake and other Finger Lakes, there are these cliffs that are actually created by wave action. Exposure of wind and waves have undermined the hillside and maintained these cliffs. They don't get as high usually as the ones that we have in our gorges, but let's see, I just jumped over. Okay, so now let's go back into our gorges and take a look at some other ones, like at Robert Treman State Park. In the upper end of the Great Gorge Enfield Glen up there is this cliff that must be 215 feet high, I figure, and it's quite a substantial exposure. And here we are over in Buttermilk Falls State Park, and I'm not sure how that one is, 50 to 100 feet high. So we have some great cliffs here, and well, we'll jump over to Fall Creek and Ithaca Falls. This is one summer that was quite dry, and so there's not much water running. You get to see the cliff that Ithaca Falls is pouring over. It's 150 feet high, and certainly one of the great waterfalls in New York State and great waterfalls in the Finger Lakes. And then Fall Creek Gorge itself, going up along the north edge of the Cornell campus, has some great cliffs as well, and other waterfalls too. So we are well supplied with cliffs. We're going to go now a little bit west to the Grand Canyon of New York State. This is Letchworth State Park, and it's the Genesee River Gorge, which was created in a way similar to our gorges around here, just much bigger. And it gets as much as 550 feet deep. Now that's more than our gorges around here. And if you've been over to Letchworth, you know that our gorges here, when you come back, they look kind of small, because this really is quite a canyon. And then let's take a look at this is from what's called Inspiration Point, and on the left there is a waterfall that doesn't always flow, but it's called Inspiration Falls, and it's one of the highest waterfalls, maybe the highest waterfall in New York State, 315 feet high. So these are substantial cliffs. But did you see any rock climbers on any of this stuff? No, because rock climbing on our rocks are mostly, as I mentioned, shale and sandstones and limestone, and they are easily crumble. They fall down, extremely dangerous for rock climbers. In fact, in Teganic Gorge, I remember one year there was some a bird researcher hired some rock climbing instructors from Cornell Outdoor Education to climb up on the cliffs to some joints or fissures in the cliffs where rough-winged swallows nested, and the rock climbers finally said, we can't do this. This is way too dangerous, because the stuff breaks off, comes down on you, and then you've got a much bigger problem. So we don't have much rock climbing. We don't have any, really. You shouldn't do any rock climbing in the cliffs of the central and western New York State because they're all sedimentary rocks that break off easily. But we are going to go to a part of the state where rock climbing is very popular. This is over in the Adirondack Mountains, or the Gunks as they're affectionately called. And the Cornell Outing Club actually goes over there each year. They have a number of trips over there going rock climbing, and I did it when I was in college and did a little bit of it. I wasn't a big rock climber. I was mostly a hiker. But they have some amazing cliffs. Now that rock is much more substantial. It's a what they call a metamorphic rock. Quartz conglomerate, I think, is what it's called. Anyway, it's pretty, as I say, competent rock that you can climb on. And this is some of the best rock climbing in the East. People travel from all over to climb in the Gunks. Then if you go down to on the Hudson River, the New Jersey, New York border area, the Palisades, and this is what they call a sill, which is molten material inserted its way between some other rock layers and hardened. This was magma that turned into basalt, which is a pretty tough rock too, and there are rock climbing routes along it. So the Palisades have been protected in an interstate park, Palisades Interstate Park, and there's also a Palisades Interstate Park region. So kind of unusual to have one of the state park regions be between two states, so shared with two states. So this is along the base of the cliffs in the Palisades. This is in Hook Mountain State Park, right in the lower right. I don't know if you'll be able to see it on your TV screen, but there's actually a person walking along a path along the Hudson River, and this is along, it'll be the bottom of this cliff here. This is Hook Mountain State Park, and in the northern end of the Palisades, where they bend around, the river bends around, you get to what they call the Tappan Zee. You may have been on the Tappan Zee Bridge. This is the widest part of the Hudson River, about 3 miles wide. It's quite substantial, and it's about as wide as Cayuga Lake is at its widest. In any case, these cliffs rise up to 800 feet, and around the bend a little farther north near the village of Haverstraw, New York, is High Tor State Park, where they do indeed soar to 800 feet, and I couldn't find a picture of that, but it's pretty dramatic when you look at it from down in the village. If you go farther north along the Hudson, you go by Bear Mountain and up into what's called the Hudson River Gorge. This is north of Bear Mountain. Storm King State Park on the other side of the Hudson River there, and we're looking at it from something called Breakneck Ridge, and this is Hudson Highlands State Park, and you look at the cliffs on that. These cliffs were carved by glaciers, plowing down the Hudson Valley, which was then inundated after the Ice Age by seawater. So anyway, there's some pretty substantial rocks there. I'm not sure what people do with rock climbing there, but they probably do. And now we're going to go up north. We're just going to bop around the state a little bit here and look at some other amazing cliffs up in the Adirondacks. This is Lake George, and on Lake George, I think it's the northwest shore of Lake George, is this rock, which I've never actually seen. It's called Rogers Rock, and this long slab of rock, which is popular with rock climbers. There's a nice campground there, I understand too, but I haven't actually been to this spot. But here's some rock climbers coming up Rogers Rock from Lake George. So pretty amazing cliffs. We have a lot of amazing cliffs in New York State, and I'm not going to show them all to you because there's too many, but some more amazing cliffs are also in the Adirondacks. This is in what's called the High Peaks area up near Lake Placid, okay? So this is on the Great Range of the Adirondacks, where the highest mountains in the state are. In fact, in the back center, you see that peak rising up above this rocky peak in the middle distance. That's Mount Marcy, the highest mountain in New York State, 5,344 feet above sea level. But in the foreground is there's mountains called Basin and Saddleback, and you're standing on something called the Gothics Mountain, and look at that cliff on that. It's a couple of thousand feet, I think. And there are rock routes up there. There are both technical routes and non-technical routes. Here are some rock climbers going up. I think it's called Rainbow Slide, and it's pretty challenging. But you can also hike up it. Here's some folks actually going down. I went up this when I was much younger, in my college days. And it was really a lot of fun. I've been up it a couple times, and there's this cable that helps you get your way up. And this will be comparable to a cable we'll see on another much bigger mountain later on. So then, okay, let's take a look at Mount Marcy there. This is looking from the south. Now, to get into these places like Gothics Mountain and Mount Marcy, you got to hike into the wilderness, and then maybe 5 or 6 or 7 miles into Gothics. But Mount Marcy from the south, you got to go like 10 miles. And this is what you see in front of you. This picture's taken from what's called Mount Haystack, which I love that mountain. But what's right in front of you is called Panther Gorge, and there's some rock routes there that rock climbers go up. Not me, I've never done it, not I. But here's some rock climbers going up the cliffs at Panther Gorge. But they had to, like I say, go in about 10 miles to get to it. So now we're going to look at another place in the Adirondack nearby, looking from the north, the top of a little mountain called Mount Joe, above a lake there called Heart Lake. Some of you may have been there. It's the place, it's not the headquarters, but it's the most popular destination for the Adirondack Mountain Club. It has a lodge there, Adirondack Lodge. And it's a great place to go hiking in the Adirondacks. The mountain in the upper left is the second highest mountain in the state, and one of my favorite mountains, called Algonquin Peak in the center on Mount McIntyre. But look over to the right. You can see a mountain that just drops off on the upper right. That's called Wallface Mountain, and that is one of the biggest cliffs in the state. There we go. I don't know where this is, up near Wallface. Now that's a pack in too. It's at least 5 to 10 miles in to get to Wallface Mountain. And people do climb that. There's lots of rock routes on it. It's between 800 and 1,000 feet tall. And here is a lady climbing up Wallface. Oh, look at that. Oh, that's not something I'm going to try, but some of you may. And I have some friends that are rock climbers, and they love it. It's a passion. So, but the cliffs are fun to look at in any case. And now we're going to go a little bit farther afield. We're going to go down to West Virginia. And I've seen this from the air, and I've also driven by it, called Seneca Rocks, a famous landmark in West Virginia, in Monongahela National Forest. And that's also a rock route. That's a layer of sandstone, very tough sandstone, that was upended by mountain building forces, and people climb it. All different kinds of climbing routes. You can hike up there too, I think, but pretty cool landmark there. So now we're going to go a couple of other places in the east, and then we're going to head out west. So North Carolina, off the Blue Ridge Parkway, Grandfather Mountain. Now, I don't know if people do rock climbing on Grandfather Mountain, but it looks like they could. This is one of the higher mountains along the Blue Ridge Parkway. It's almost 6,000 feet high, and you can get up to the summit by a little auto road. Now we're going to go north up to Maine, northern Maine, the northern end of the Appalachian Trail. This is Mount Katahdin. The north side of Mount Katahdin is like a 2,000-foot precipice going down into a place called Chimney Pond. I'll show you in a second. Mount Katahdin. I've been on that a number of times, but not recently. This is called the ridge. I think on the right is where it drops off to Chimney Pond. This ridge is called the Knife Edge because it's a very narrow ridge to hike on. And, let's see if there's trail markers on there. I don't know. But anyway, like I say, this is the end of the Appalachian Trail at that very peak up there. It's come over 2,000 miles from Georgia. All right, so, and now this is down at Chimney Pond in the north side of Mount Katahdin. You can only get there by trail, and there's some lean-tos there, and you can climb up various trails. So I don't know anything about rock climbing on Mount Katahdin, but it looks like there might be some opportunities. Well, last month, June of 2014, I finally got myself back out to Yosemite National Park, and if you watch some of my other episodes this summer, you've seen more about that. And I hadn't been there in many, 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 many years, and I spent about a week there. And that's got some of the most famous cliffs in the United States, in North America. And on the left-hand side of this picture is perhaps the most famous rock climbing cliff in the United States, called El Capitan. There it is. This is one profile of it. Various views of it. You drive along the road into the park, and it's right there, and you pull over and you look up in awe. And people are looking to see if there are any rock climbers on it, but I don't see them. And finally, you look after a while. If you have binoculars, particularly, you can find them. This cliff rises like 3,500 feet. Now that's like 3/4 of a mile into the sky, and it basically straight up. So I was there for a little while one evening, you can see here, and with some other people that are standing out in the field. We're trying to see if we can see any rock climbers. Now, if you look in the very middle of this picture and you squint your eyes, you might be able to make out a little blue dot. Well, that little blue dot, there it is, zoomed in a little bit more. This was a handheld camera, so I didn't get a real, steady shot, but that is a rock climber. And he's about to spend the night on that ledge because it takes several days to climb up El Capitan. I've heard as many as 5. So let's take another shot. This is a dot in the middle of the picture here, in the middle of the cliff. There's actually 2 climbers right there. So how the heck do they spend the night up there? Here's a guy climbing up. This comes from a documentary film about it. And there's a guy climbing up. And here's some guys carrying their gear up the face of El Capitan. And they spend the night. So these little slings they can lay out. They can put their a platform out and attach it to the cliff with pitons and carabiners and straps, and they sleep up there. And then the next day they get going and climb up the rest of it. So El Capitan, so famous. There's a lot of films about it and so forth. You go online, you find amazing things. But there's another cliff that's maybe even better known. If you look in this picture and you look in the back of it. See if we can go back even. Okay, in the back, the very center in the back, you can see this dome, half dome it's actually called. And let's take a closer look from below. This is half dome from below. This cliff rises almost a mile. It's actually about 4,700 feet above Yosemite Valley, and it is one of the most famous landmarks in Yosemite National Park, in California, in the United States even. I camped in a campground there right under Half Dome. Well, not right under it, but had that view looking up from my campsite. So I got to look at it a lot, including one evening when I watched the light dwindle on Half Dome. Amazing. Got darker. And finally, this is a long exposure shot showing stars, and the top of Half Dome is illuminated by moonlight. Now this next picture, take a look. You see what looks like a star or some kind of misplaced white dot on the left-hand side of the top of the cliff. That's a light. And I think that was a climber's camp that was spending the night up there, and they had a light, and it would go on and off. And there's other lights on Half Dome as well. So it's amazing. So people like to climb up Half Dome. Lots and lots of people. In fact, that's one of the things. I'm going to zoom into my hat here, actually. I've got, there it is, Yosemite Half Dome. Everybody likes to say to me, did you climb up Half Dome? Yeah, I did when I was in college. It's quite a strenuous hike. Here's an overlook called Glacier Point. You can look at Half Dome from very dramatic view, but it also affords you a view to the right. The trail you have to take up goes by those waterfalls, Vernal Falls, and the bigger one in the back is Nevada Falls. And then you climb up the back side of this side of Half Dome, or actually out of the view on the other side, and on the other side of the dome, and there's this amazing trail with cables going up, and you get up there and you look off, and it's like looking out of an airplane. Well, we're going to go right to a video that the Yosemite Conservancy of the National Park Service has made about Half Dome. So I want to go right to that.
I think it's almost impossible to walk around the valley in the eastern end when Half Dome is in view and not look at it. How do you not look at it?
Like every time I go to Mirror Lake, I bike up there, I'm kind of staring at the pavement when I bike up there, and I park my bike and I stand up and I just look up at the thing, and it's like, Jeez. Okay, it's huge. I'd forgotten how big it is. And I feel like that happens to me, at least once a week with Half Dome.
Think about where Half Dome actually is. It's at the far end of the valley. Think about all the things that are starting to accrete on one's imagination. You have Brideville Fall, El Capitan, Cathedral Rock, Cathedral Spires, Sentinel Rock, Sentinel Fall, Yosemite Fall. And then suddenly there, as if you've seen it all, just standing out there stark against the blue sky, is Half Dome. It does appear to be almost a kind of design, but it's the happenstance of erosion that things worked out that way.
The first geologist to interpret Half Dome kind of assumed that the other half of the dome just cleaved away in one catastrophic event. And that would be kind of a neat, tidy story for how it formed, but we really don't think that it formed that way. There's really not any evidence for that. So instead, it's a more typical geologic story where there are several different things going on over really long time periods. Basically, there's glacial erosion, steepening the faces, and there's this process of exfoliation and rockfall from the sheer face that just slowly change the shape of that rock formation through time.
Everyone has that sense that it's unique, that there's something literally singular about it. There's no other place, no other object like this on the face of the earth. I think that's part of the charisma. I mean, let's face it, that's what we're really talking about. Some rocks have it and some rocks don't. And Half Dome is charismatic.
You can, in probably 2 lines, make an image of Half Dome that somebody on the other side of the world will recognize as Half Dome. I mean, it's that distinctive of an icon.
It's still just a mirror. It's just a reflection of the power that Half Dome has on our imagination, that we try to duplicate or replicate, that power in little trinkets or medallions or what have you. Because people recognize that when they hold that thing, they're holding to some degree an aspect of Yosemite, a dimension of Yosemite. There's something about the shape of it, the size of it, and also how nature itself has composed how we see it. I mean, that's the thing that's so important about this. It's not Half Dome viewed from other angles.
From almost any other angle, it doesn't really look like a Half Dome. I can't say what it does look like because it sort of has a unique appearance from all those other angles.
Talking to people on the trail who are hiking right behind it, this huge, overwhelming presence on their left, and they don't even realize it's Half Dome. And they're going, well, how far is it to the top? Well, it's right there. Oh, that's Half Dome? What did you think it was? But it doesn't, they just have that one mental picture of it.
Half Dome is perfectly inaccessible, being probably the only one of all the prominent points about the Yosemite which has never been and never will be trodden by human foot. And that's a quote from Josiah Whitney in 1870. 5 years later, it got climbed by George Anderson. I think that was a dare more than anything else. Well, a lot of it's the sheerness of it. It just looks so impossible from all directions that I think that attracts people, and they really feel like they've done something when they do get up there.
And it's hard work. Let's just face it. Let's just cut right to the chase there. It is difficult. It is hard as far as your heart and lungs. Even if you're in good shape, it's still taxing.
It's a heck of a hike. People always ask, well, how many miles is it to Half Dome? And miles don't matter. It's 5,000 vertical feet. So it's a physical challenge, but it's a delightful hike.
It's a spectacular hike because you get to walk by Vernal Falls and Nevada Falls, and you get to walk through little Yosemite Valley. It's kind of like this natural staircase, leading you up to Half Dome.
But then, boom, you arrive at the subdome, and there's the cables right in front of you. And because you're looking straight at them, they look really steep. And it's funny to just sit up there and listen to people. People get up to that point, and they're breathing hard. And they pop over the top of the subdome. Boom, there's the cables, and the first thing out of their mouth is, no way, not doing it, not going up there. But then you just sit there and you listen to them. They stop, and they have some water, and they eat their lunch. And 95% of those people go ahead and they keep going and they do it. And then when they get down, you listen to those same people again, and they're just high. They are just flying because they did it. And they got that experience at the summit, and they surprised themselves by being able to go up the cables.
It's an exposed place. It's exposed in terms of heights, so you can fall off of it, and a fall is most likely going to be fatal. It's exposed to the elements, which means that it can get pretty cold up there in a hurry.
One of the biggest hazards up on the dome itself is the weather. Most of the accidents we've had on the cable occurred when the rock was wet. If you're wearing running shoes without good rubber on them, it's almost impossible to keep your feet under you. And that's what's happened on some of those accidents.
And it's, I think, most importantly exposed to things like thunderstorms. And Half Dome gets hit by lightning all the time. There's really no place to seek shelter when you're up there. You just have to get down. The problem is you have to get down in a hurry, and sometimes if there are a lot of people up there all trying to get down the same route, you can't get down nearly as fast as you probably would like to.
Any chance of rain, any chance of lightning, just save it for another day. Go enjoy some other part of the park. Go for a hike farther up the Merced. Do something. That's not the place to be. Half Dome presents a lot of classic dilemmas in wilderness management. We're getting a lot of first-time visitors to wilderness up there, which is great. And they are being introduced to wilderness and having this wonderful experience. That's something we want to encourage. It's wonderful. But there's so many of them that on some days it's not really much of a wilderness experience anymore. There are a lot of people up there.
There's no way to say to yourself, I'm alone in this world when you're hiking a Half Dome. There's people in front of you, there's people behind you, there's people beside you, there's people that you pass as you're making your way up, there's people that pass you as you're making your way up. So there's this collective movement towards elevation and illumination when people are walking to the top of Half Dome. And where else do you have that, except in that sacred sense of people in a pilgrimage?
A high percentage of the people up there aren't even hikers. They don't do this routinely. They may not have ever hiked that many miles in their life. And for some reason, when they come to Yosemite, they think that's the thing to do.
It does seem, just from me talking with people that hike the trail, that a lot of the people up there, this is like a big milestone in their life in some way. There's more to it than just reaching the top of Half Dome. It's accomplishing some goal, or it symbolizes something in their lives.
Or people telling me stories about how Half Dome changed their life just because it was the thing to do, but it introduced them to the wilderness and it turned them into a wilderness lover and a hiker, and they went on to do that the rest of their life.
I met a cancer survivor once who was determined to get well enough to climb Half Dome. A lot of people try and do it before they reach a certain age. It just symbolizes a lot to them.
All those little problems that you had, that you brought with you, they really are little problems on top of Half Dome. So I think that's one of the reasons why people go up there. It's not just so they can have that view looking out, it's that clearer view looking within.
I think that just kind of lends to the aura of the whole thing, that it's almost kind of magical in some ways, and that's not something I usually say as a scientist, but Half Dome does evoke emotions, and feelings and interests on a whole scale. I think that's why it appeals to artists and scientists alike, and everybody in between. It's got some kind of appeal for everybody.
Okay, so you ready for that? Well, thanks for joining me. We got to go. Episode 82, July 30th, 2014. See you soon.